On a frozen road, in the middle of a white night and screaming wind, one decision was enough to change fate. In the glare of headlights, a tiny puppy stood frozen in the lane, shaking, unable to run, with nowhere to go. 1 second later, an oncoming truck could have turned it into a memory, and the witness into someone who would carry regret for life. But the man who stopped was a Navy SEAL, trained to step into danger and never to leave anyone behind. And somewhere at home, a loyal German shepherd waited, as if it already sensed that destiny was on its way. Before we begin, tell us where you're watching from, and don't forget to like and subscribe. Every follow gives us the strength to share more powerful stories. Now, let's begin. Snow didn't fall in flakes so much as it fell in decisions. Small, silent votes cast from a bruised sky, each one landing wherever gravity wanted it. The town up north wore winter the way old men wore medals, not for show, but because it was there, heavy and earned. The traffic light at the main intersection pulsed through its colors with stubborn patience, a lonely lighthouse for a road that pretended it was empty. The street lamps made the snow glow, turning the night into a cold kind of daylight, bright enough to see your mistakes coming. Ethan Cole drove with both hands on the wheel. He was 35, 6 feet tall, about 1.83 meters, with the compact strength of a man who had spent years carrying weight that didn't want to be carried. His body didn't broadcast power. It held it in reserve, like a door that looked ordinary until you tried to break it. His face was clean-shaven, shaved close enough that the sharp square of his jaw and the clear line of his cheekbones were fully exposed. The kind of angles you got from discipline and winters rather than vanity. His hair was dark brown, cut in a military style that had grown just a fraction longer than regulation. Still neat, still controlled, but softened by time and the private choice of a man who no longer needed permission. His skin was light but weathered by northern wind, the faint roughness of cold on the cheeks and knuckles. His eyes were gray-blue, steady and unblinking, the kind that didn't judge, only measured, and had seen too many versions of too late to be easily surprised. The clothes he wore were the same clothes he wore nearly every day, like a vow he never said out loud. An old olive-gray tactical combat shirt, softened by years and laundering, frayed faintly at the cuffs and shoulders. Under it, a dark red thermal layer showed at the collar when he moved. Warmth kept close like a secret. His combat pants were worn brown earth mixed with moss green, scuffed at the knees, cargo pockets sagging slightly from habitual use. Scratched old military work boots gripped the pedals. An old military watch sat on his wrist, its face faintly scraped, its strap stiff with history. He'd meant to make it home quietly. He'd meant to let the heater hum and the tires whisper on salted asphalt and the night pass like a harmless dream. But winter had other plans. A shadow moved at the edge of his headlights. Not a deer, too small. Not a trash bag, too alive. It flashed gold for half a heartbeat, then vanished into the darkness again, as if the road itself had swallowed it. Ethan's foot eased off the gas. His shoulders tightened in a way his mind didn't fully authorize. There was a familiar sharpness in his chest, an old reflex from older nights, the kind of instinct that came before thought. Then the thing returned, straight into the lane. It was a puppy. A labrador, still more softness than shape. Pale cream-yellow fur catching the white glare like straw under moonlight. Too young to know traffic. Too young to understand that headlights meant danger and engine noise meant death. The puppy ran like it was chasing something it couldn't see, then suddenly froze. It didn't bolt back to the curb. It didn't leap aside. It locked up in the middle of the road, legs stiff, belly low, as if trying to become part of the asphalt. Ethan didn't think. He acted. His boot slammed the brake. The tires shrieked on ice, a thin, ugly scream that cut through the winter calm. The truck lurched, sliding for a fraction of a second before the traction bit. Ethan's hands corrected the wheel with automatic precision. His heartbeat jumped into his throat, hot and loud against the cold. Behind him, a horn erupted, angry, panicked. A pickup's headlights swelled in his mirror. Too close, too bright. The driver leaned on the horn like rage could stop physics. Ethan heard shouted words, muffled, swallowed by the sealed cab and the snow. The puppy stayed there, a tiny statue in the kill zone. Ethan flicked on his hazard lights. Orange blinkers stuttered in the falling snow, a frantic Morse code that said, "Please, not here, not now." He threw the truck into park and shoved the door open. Cold slammed into him like a living thing. He stepped out into the lane and raised one hand high, palm open to the oncoming pickup in a gesture that was half command, half prayer. His other arm stretched toward the puppy, not grabbing yet, not startling it. He kept his movements smooth, controlled, like approaching a live wire. "Stop!" he shouted, voice cutting clean through the night. The pickup's brakes squealed. The truck fishtailed slightly, then steadied. It stopped short, close enough that Ethan could see the driver's silhouette. A broad-shouldered man in a knit cap, face flushed with adrenaline, mouth moving as he yelled. He looked like the kind of working guy the North produced. Thick hands, heavier coat, anger born from fear. His words were swallowed by the wind, but his expression said enough. Ethan didn't argue. He didn't apologize. He pointed down at the puppy with a sharp, unmistakable motion. The driver's posture shifted, anger draining into realization. He threw his hands up in a helpless, "What the hell?" gesture, then stayed put, hazard lights flashing too. Ethan crouched. The puppy's eyes were wide and glassy, not tracking him properly, not really seeing him. The pupils were blown with terror. Its small ribs moved fast under its fur, a fluttering panic like a trapped bird. Its paws trembled against the cold pavement. There was a faint, high sound, more breath than whine, leaking out of it. Ethan's mind, trained to catalog, noticed details in the same instant his heart did. A smear of road salt crusting the fur, a dampness near one ear, maybe melted snow, and around the puppy's neck, something that didn't belong. Not a collar, a piece of thin rope, frayed and dirty, hanging loose like a snapped leash. It had rubbed the fur flat beneath it, leaving an angry line on tender skin. Ethan swallowed, and something hard passed through him. He had seen cruelty in places that didn't make the news. He had seen what happened when the strong treated the weak as disposable. He had also seen what happened when people decided to do one decent thing in the middle of hell. He wasn't sure which kind of story this was yet. He reached slowly, sliding his hand under the puppy's chest. The little body was lighter than it should have been, too easy to lift, too cold. For a terrifying second, the puppy went limp in his hands. Not fighting, not wriggling, not even yelping. That frightened him more than teeth would have. A healthy puppy protested. A healthy puppy argued with the universe. This one had surrendered. Ethan stood and turned, keeping the puppy close to his chest. He could feel its heart hammering through its thin ribs, fast, frantic, determined to outrun the night. The pickup driver cracked his window. "Jesus, man, where'd it come from?" Ethan shook his head once. His voice came out lower, steadier. "Don't know." The driver exhaled and rubbed his face with one hand. "You almost got yourself killed." Ethan almost laughed. It would have been bitter, the kind of laugh soldiers used when the truth was too sharp. Instead, he said, "Yeah, so did it." The man stared at the puppy, then looked away like guilt had teeth. "You need help?" Ethan glanced down at the trembling bundle of fur. "I've got it." He carried the puppy toward the shoulder, each step careful on the slick surface. The night smelled like exhaust and snow and something faintly metallic. Winter's own taste. As his boots hit the edge of the road, something in his chest loosened. Then it tightened again. Because the puppy did something strange. It wasn't trying to escape. It wasn't trying to bite. It wasn't even trying to hide its face. It was twisting its head backward, straining to look toward the intersection, toward the traffic light, toward something behind Ethan, something it recognized, or feared, or expected. The puppy's gaze was fixed on that direction with a desperate intensity, like it was waiting for someone who wasn't coming. Ethan followed its stare. There, near the base of the traffic light pole, half buried in drifted snow, sat a cardboard box. It was dented and softened by moisture. Its corners collapsed as if it had been carried too tightly. A strip of packing tape hung loose. The box looked wrong in the clean white of the night, like a bruise on fresh skin. Ethan walked closer. His breath came out in clouds. The puppy shivered against his chest, but it didn't struggle. It kept watching the box as if it held either salvation or punishment. Ethan leaned down and saw writing on the side, scrawled in black marker. The letters were uneven, as if the hand that wrote them couldn't stop shaking. "Please, please take care of this puppy. He's a sweet dog." Ethan read it twice, the second time slower. Something shifted behind his ribs, an ache that wasn't physical. He imagined a small figure in the snow, clutching this box, fingers numb, eyes wet. He imagined the kind of choice that left a note instead of a goodbye. He looked up and scanned the street. No one was running away now. No shadow darted between cars. No footsteps marked the fresh snow except his own and the chaotic prints from the puppy's scramble. The traffic light changed from red to green with mindless obedience. The town kept breathing. The world kept moving, indifferent as always. Ethan tightened his hold on the puppy. He didn't know the puppy's name. He didn't know where it belonged. He didn't know why someone would leave a living thing under a street lamp like a prayer someone else was supposed to answer. But he knew this. Tonight, the road had tried to claim a small, trembling life. Tonight, it had failed. Ethan turned back toward his truck, hazard lights still blinking like a warning to the universe. The puppy pressed its cold nose into the fabric of Ethan's old tactical shirt, as if it had finally found something steady enough to believe in. And Ethan, who had learned long ago not to promise anything he couldn't deliver, still found himself whispering into the winter air. "All right. Come on." He carried the puppy away from the intersection, leaving the box behind under the traffic light's glow. The note still clinging to its cardboard like a quiet plea that had finally been heard. Ethan didn't drive right away. He stood by the shoulder with the puppy pressed to his chest, the cold seeping through his jacket and into his bones, as if winter itself wanted to remind him that nothing rescued ever came away clean. The hazard lights blinked behind him, orange and insistent, casting brief shadows that jumped and vanished on the snow. The road had gone quiet again. Cars passed more cautiously now, tires hissing instead of screaming, their drivers leaning forward in their seats to look at him, at the puppy, at the cardboard box near the traffic light. Curiosity slowed them more than kindness ever did. The puppy trembled, a fine, constant shiver that never quite stopped. It wasn't crying anymore. That worried Ethan. Silence, he knew, was sometimes worse than panic. He shifted his grip, tucking the small body closer to his chest, letting the warmth of his own core bleed through layers of fabric. The puppy's nose brushed the frayed edge of his tactical shirt, damp and cold. Its breath hitched, then steadied as if it had found a rhythm it could trust, at least for the moment. "Easy," Ethan murmured, more out of habit than expectation. His voice came out low, even, the voice he used when chaos needed boundaries. He turned his head back toward the intersection. The box was still there. It looked smaller now somehow, less like an object and more like a mistake that hadn't been erased yet. Snow had begun to creep into its open seams, softening the cardboard, blurring its edges. The traffic light above it cycled on, indifferent. Ethan walked toward it slowly. Each step left a clean imprint in the snow, heavy boot prints that would be gone by morning. He crouched and read the note again, closer this time, the marker strokes thick and uneven. "Please take care of this puppy. He's a sweet dog. No name, no explanation, no apology, just a plea." Ethan straightened, the puppy's weight steady in his arms. He scanned the sidewalks, the parked cars, the dark windows of the buildings lining the street. Somewhere, someone had let go of this box and walked away. Or been pulled away. A voice broke the quiet. "Hey." Ethan turned. A man stood a few yards back near the edge of the sidewalk, hands shoved deep into the pockets of a thick work jacket. He was in his late 40s, maybe early 50s, built solidly rather than tall, with the square posture of someone who'd spent most of his life standing on concrete floors. His beard was peppered with gray, trimmed short but uneven, as if he cut it himself without much care for symmetry. A knit cap sat low on his head, pulled down against the cold, flattening, thinning brown hair. His eyes were sharp, observant, the eyes of someone who watched passing traffic for a living. "I saw that," the man said, nodding toward the road. "You stopping like that. You okay?" Ethan held the puppy up just enough for the man to see. "It is." The man let out a slow breath. "Jesus, that thing came out of nowhere." "Did it?" Ethan asked. The man hesitated, shifted his weight. His boots scraped softly against the icy sidewalk. "Not exactly," he said. That was enough. Ethan waited. The man glanced toward the box, then back at Ethan, as if checking whether this conversation was allowed to exist. Finally, he stepped closer, stopping just short of the shoulder. Up close, his jacket smelled faintly of oil and cold metal, the kind of scent that never really washed out. "Name's Mark," he said. "I own the auto shop down the block. Night shifts mess with your sleep, so I was out front when it happened." Ethan nodded once. He didn't offer his own name. He didn't need to. Mark scratched at his beard, eyes flicking again to the box. That puppy didn't just wander out here. Ethan felt something tighten in his chest. "What did you see?" Mark exhaled, the breath fogging the air between them. "Girl. Young. Couldn't have been more than 18. Maybe less." The words landed carefully, like fragile things. "She was carrying that box," Mark continued, "holding it like it weighed 100 pounds instead of whatever that is." He gestured vaguely toward the puppy. Ethan adjusted his grip again, thumb brushing unconsciously along the puppy's spine. It leaned into the touch without realizing it. "She stood there a while," Mark said. "Longer than you'd think. kept looking up and down the street like she was waiting for someone to yell at her. Ethan pictured it without trying. A small figure under the streetlight, snow catching in her hair, hands numb around cardboard. There was a guy with her, Mark added. Ethan's eyes lifted. Guy? Mark nodded. Older, not old, but older than her. Heavy coat, big shoulders, the kind of presence that fills space whether you want it to or not. Something dark stirred in Ethan's gut. They were arguing, Mark went on. Not loud, tight. You know? The kind where every word hurts because it's been said before. What was he saying? Ethan asked. Mark shook his head. Couldn't hear everything. Just pieces. We're not keeping it. I told you already. Stuff like that. And her? She didn't say much, mostly just shook her head. Mark paused, jaw tightening. She hugged the box, like if she held on hard enough it might disappear. The puppy shifted suddenly in Ethan's arms, letting out a thin, broken sound, half whine, half breath. Its paws flexed against his jacket, claws catching briefly in the fabric. Ethan stilled, lowered his chin until his breath warmed the puppy's head. The sound faded, but the tension stayed. Mark watched this quietly. That guy, Mark continued. He kept checking his watch. Finally grabbed her arm. Not rough. At least not enough to make a scene. But enough. Enough was enough. He pointed at the pole, Mark said. Said something like, "Put it there. Someone'll find it." Ethan closed his eyes for a second. When he opened them, the world looked sharper. She wrote the note after that, Mark said. Took her glove off to do it. Hands were shaking so bad I thought she'd dropped the marker. Did she look back? Ethan asked. Mark swallowed. Yeah. 3 times. Last time she was crying. Quiet, like she didn't want him to hear. Ethan's jaw set, muscles tightening along the line of his face. He imagined the girl being pulled away, her footsteps leaving the snow, the box left behind like a confession no one had asked for. She didn't know the puppy would get out, Mark added quickly. I'm sure of that. She pushed the flaps down, taped it shut. It must have worked loose when the snow melted. Ethan nodded slowly. It fit. Too well. Mark shoved his hands deeper into his pockets. I almost said something. Almost went over there. But you didn't, Ethan said, not accusing, just stating. Mark's mouth twitched. Yeah, I didn't. Silence settled between them, heavy and uncomfortable. The puppy let out another small sound, softer this time, its head pressed more firmly against Ethan's chest, nose burrowing into the worn fabric like it was trying to hide inside him. Ethan felt it then, not anger exactly, not yet. Something colder, something older. The sense that the world kept asking the same question over and over, and most people kept answering it the same way. Not me. He looked down at the puppy, at the frayed rope still hanging uselessly from its neck, at the way its body fit against his like it had been designed to be there. I'm taking it with me, he said. Mark nodded. Figured. You got a vet open? Ethan asked. Mark's eyebrows lifted slightly, surprised. Yeah, emergency clinic off Route 7. Dr. Hale runs it. She's good people. Ethan committed the information to memory instantly. Mark hesitated, then added, You need anything? Ethan shook his head. No. That was the truth. Mark lingered a moment longer, eyes flicking between Ethan and the puppy, then stepped back toward the sidewalk. You did a good thing, he said, almost reluctantly. Not many would have. Ethan didn't answer. Praise slid off him like snow off steel. Mark turned and walked away, boots crunching softly, shoulders hunched against the cold. Within seconds, he was just another shape in the night. Ethan stood alone again. The hazard lights ticked. The traffic light changed, and the puppy did something unexpected. It lifted its head. Not much. Just enough to look past Ethan's shoulder, back toward the street, back toward the empty space where the girl had stood. Its ears twitched, one then the other, as if it had heard something that wasn't sound. Ethan followed its gaze instinctively. There was nothing there. No movement, no shadow, just falling snow and the faint hum of electricity in the streetlight. The puppy stared for a long second longer, then slowly turned its head back and tucked its face under Ethan's chin, pressing close in a way that felt deliberate, like a decision. Ethan felt a chill that had nothing to do with temperature. He didn't believe in signs, not really. He'd learned long ago that looking for meaning in chaos could break you if you let it. But standing there, with the cold gnawing at his bones and a life warming itself against his heart, he wondered if sometimes meaning didn't come from above or beyond, but from what refused to let go. He walked back to his truck, opened the passenger door, and settled the puppy onto the seat. It curled instinctively, nose tucked in, body folding in on itself like it had practiced the shape many times before. Ethan closed the door gently. Before getting in, he looked once more at the box under the traffic light. Then he did something he hadn't planned. He carried it to the curb and set it upright, out of the lane, pressed the flaps down, smoothed the note flat against the cardboard. He didn't know why. Maybe because leaving it there, half-crushed and forgotten, felt wrong. Maybe because some part of him believed that every story deserved to be placed carefully, even after it had ended. He climbed into the truck and started the engine. As he pulled away, the puppy stirred, lifting its head just enough to look at him. Its eyes, still dark with fear, held something else now. Confusion, maybe, or the fragile beginning of trust. Ethan met its gaze briefly. "We'll figure it out," he said quietly. The road ahead stretched white and open, disappearing into the falling snow. And for the first time that night, Ethan drove forward without looking back. The emergency clinic sat low and square against the snow, a single-story building with too much light spilling out of it for the hour. The windows glowed a sterile yellow-white, the kind of brightness that suggested answers might exist inside, even if they weren't the ones you wanted. Ethan parked close to the entrance. The puppy had stayed curled on the passenger seat the entire drive, pressed into the corner as if trying to make itself smaller than it already was. It hadn't cried. It hadn't slept either. Its eyes followed the movement of passing streetlights with a distant, unfocused attention, pupils still wide, body held in a tension that never quite released. Ethan cut the engine. Silence rushed in, thick and sudden. The puppy lifted its head at once, ears twitching, breath hitching. The quiet seemed to frighten it more than the noise had. Ethan reached out slowly, resting 2 fingers against the puppy's shoulder. Not restraining, just anchoring. The fur was cold under his touch, but not as cold as it had been on the road. "That's all right," he said softly. "We're here." The words felt strange in his mouth. He didn't know what here meant yet. Inside, the clinic smelled like disinfectant and wet fur. The floor tiles were a dull gray, scuffed by claws and boots and years of emergency footsteps. Somewhere down the hall, a dog barked, sharp, defensive. The puppy flinched hard, body curling inward. Ethan adjusted his hold, lifting the puppy fully into his arms before the sound could sink deeper. A woman stood behind the reception desk, mid-40s maybe, with tired eyes and hair pulled back in a loose knot that had surrendered to gravity hours ago. She wore navy scrubs under a fleece jacket, the cuffs darkened from constant washing. Her posture was calm but alert, like someone used to surprises. She looked up and took in the scene in a single practiced glance. The man's stance, the puppy's size, the rope around its neck. "Emergency?" she asked. "Yes," Ethan said. That was enough. She buzzed the door open and waved him through without another word. The exam room was small and overly bright. White walls, stainless steel table, paper dispenser mounted crookedly on the side. The kind of room where time felt suspended, every second waiting for permission to move again. "Set him here," a voice said. Dr. Miriam Hale stepped into view, already gloving up. She was in her early 50s, tall and spare, with iron gray hair cut short and clean around her face. Her features were sharp but not severe. High cheekbones, a long straight nose, eyes the color of winter water. She moved with efficiency that suggested decades of repetition, but her hands were gentle when she reached for the puppy. "Easy," she murmured, more to the animal than to Ethan. "I've got you." The puppy tensed when she touched it, a full-body lock that made Ethan's chest tighten. But Dr. Hale didn't push. She paused, letting her hand rest lightly against the puppy's side until the shaking eased by a fraction. "How old?" she asked. "I don't know," Ethan said. "Couple months, maybe." "Doctor," Hale nodded. "That fits." She examined the puppy with careful precision, checking eyes, ears, gums. Her fingers traced ribs and legs, pressed gently along the spine. The puppy trembled through it all, but it didn't resist. It seemed to accept handling with the same resigned stillness it had shown on the road. "That rope's been there a while?" Dr. Hale noted, frowning slightly as she inspected the mark beneath it. "Not tight enough to cut, but enough to irritate. We'll get that off." She slid a pair of scissors under the frayed rope and cut. The sound was small, almost insignificant, but Ethan felt it land somewhere deep in his chest. The rope fell away. The puppy startled, then froze again, as if unsure what freedom was supposed to feel like. Dr. Hale straightened and met Ethan's gaze. "No obvious fractures, no internal bleeding that I can feel. He's cold, dehydrated, and scared out of his mind. But physically, he should be okay." Ethan exhaled a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. "But," she continued, holding up one finger, "that doesn't mean we're done." She gestured for him to sit. He did, perching on the edge of the metal stool, elbows resting on his knees, hands clasped loosely. "Trauma like this," Dr. Hale said, "especially in a puppy that young, can leave marks you don't see on X-rays. His nervous system is in overdrive. That freezing behavior? That's not stubbornness. That's his brain deciding stillness is safer than flight." Ethan nodded slowly. It made sense. Too much sense. "He'll need warmth, quiet, predictability," she went on. "And we'll need to monitor him. I don't know his vaccination history." "I don't either," Ethan said. Dr. Hale's eyes softened just slightly. "Then we assume the worst and hope for the best." She gave the puppy a small injection and wrapped him in a warm towel, tucking it snug around his body like a nest. The puppy let out a low sound, not quite a whine, more like a breath finally leaving its lungs. For the first time since Ethan had seen him, the puppy's eyes drifted closed. Ethan watched that happen with an intensity that surprised him. "He'll sleep now," Dr. Hale said. "Adrenaline crash. Let him." She finished her notes, then looked back at Ethan. "What's your plan?" Ethan hesitated. It wasn't a question he'd answered yet, even to himself. "I'm taking him home," he said finally. "At least for tonight." Dr. Hale studied him. Not critically, but thoroughly. The way professionals looked at things they didn't fully trust, but wanted to. "You have other animals?" she asked. "Yes." "What kind?" "A German Shepherd." Dr. Hale raised an eyebrow. "Adult?" "Yes." She considered that. "Introductions need to be slow, supervised, separate spaces at first." "I know," Ethan said. Something flickered in her expression. Approval, maybe, or recognition. "Good," she said. "Then you're already thinking ahead." She wrote out instructions, explaining feeding schedules, warning signs to watch for, vomiting, diarrhea, lethargy. Her tone was clear, direct, without drama. As she spoke, Ethan felt something else settle in. Responsibility, heavy and unmistakable. When she finished, she paused. "You have a name for him?" Ethan looked down at the small, sleeping shape wrapped in the towel. "No," he said. Then, after a moment, "Not yet." Dr. Hale nodded. "That's fine. Names can wait." She handed him the bundled puppy. "Bring him back if anything changes. Day or night." Ethan stood, adjusting the puppy's weight instinctively. As he turned to leave, the puppy stirred. Its eyes cracked open, unfocused, then sharpened just enough to find Ethan's face. Its small paw shifted, pressing weakly against his chest, right over his heart. Ethan stopped. The moment was brief, but it hit hard. He felt it then, clear as a held breath. This was no longer just an errand, no longer a temporary act. It was a line crossed. He didn't say anything. He just tightened his hold slightly and walked out into the cold again. Outside, the snow had thickened. The night pressed close, quiet and expectant. Ethan opened the truck door, settled the puppy back onto the passenger seat, and tucked the towel around him carefully. Before starting the engine, he rested his hand against the puppy's back one last time. "All right," he said quietly. "Let's go home." The puppy didn't answer, but it didn't pull away either. Ethan's house sat a little apart from the road, a low, weathered structure of dark wood and stone that looked as if it had grown there rather than been built. Snow clung to the porch railing and filled the grooves of the steps. The single porch light cast a warm cone over the entryway, turning falling flakes into slow, drifting sparks. Home. The word didn't land the way it used to. Ethan parked, cut the engine, and listened for a moment to the quiet settling back into place. The puppy lay curled on the passenger seat, wrapped in the towel from the clinic. His breathing was steadier now, shallow but even. His small body rose and fell in a rhythm that felt almost fragile enough to shatter if the night made a wrong move. Ethan opened the door, and the cold rushed in again. The puppy stirred, but didn't panic. That felt like progress, even if it was too early to trust it. As Ethan stepped onto the porch, the door opened before he could reach for the handle. Archer stood in the doorway. The German Shepherd filled the frame with practiced authority. He was 5 years old, black and tan shading into sable along his back, his coat thick and well-kept without being glossy. His posture was alert but not rigid. Ears up, head level, weight balanced forward. A working dog's stance. A dog that paid attention because once, paying attention had mattered. A black harness with dark red trim hugged his chest and shoulders, the material scuffed from use but sturdy. His amber eyes locked on Ethan first, checking him the way he always did. Only after that did Archer's gaze shift, down, then back up, to the bundle in Ethan's arms. Archer's tail stilled. Ethan paused on the threshold, letting the door hang open between warm light and winter darkness. He didn't step inside yet. He knew better than to rush this moment. "It's okay," he said quietly, though he wasn't entirely sure who he was saying it to. Archer took a slow step forward, nostrils flaring, his ears tilted, catching details, the unfamiliar scent of antiseptic, the sharp edge of fear, the faint, warm note of young life. His body didn't tense further, but a low sound vibrated in his chest. Not a growl exactly, more a warning, a question. Ethan felt the weight of it settle between them. "I found him," Ethan said, voice calm, factual. He shifted his grip slightly so Archer could see the puppy's face without feeling challenged. The puppy's eyes fluttered open. For a second, they met Archer's gaze. The puppy froze, not in the way he had on the road, but close. His small body went stiff, breath catching, eyes wide and glassy. His head ducked instinctively, chin tucking toward his chest as if trying to fold himself smaller. Archer stopped moving. The sound in his chest cut off abruptly. His ears flicked back a fraction, uncertainty breaking through his steady posture. He lowered his head slightly, not looming, not advancing, just watching. Ethan stepped inside and closed the door behind him, sealing out the cold. The house smelled like wood smoke and coffee grounds and Archer's familiar presence, the warmth wrapped around them, immediate and forgiving. Ethan's boots left wet marks on the floor, snow melting in uneven crescents. He carried the puppy into the living room and set him down carefully on a folded blanket near the couch. He didn't remove the towel right away. He wanted the puppy to have something familiar, even if that familiarity was only borrowed from a clinic. Archer stayed back, near the doorway, body angled so he could see both Ethan and the puppy. His tail hung low but loose. His eyes never left the small shape on the blanket. Ethan crouched and gently loosened the towel. The puppy didn't try to escape. He didn't explore. He stayed exactly where he was placed, shoulders hunched, gaze darting between Ethan's face and Archer's silhouette. Ethan straightened slowly. "Archer," he said, and there was a note in his voice that only Archer ever heard. "Easy." Archer licked his lips once, then sat. It wasn't obedience born of command. It was consideration. Ethan exhaled. He moved through the room, setting up boundaries with the same care he'd once used to clear rooms and mark safe zones. Archer's food bowl stayed in the kitchen. A second bowl, new, unused, went near the puppy's blanket, but at a respectful distance. Water followed. The puppy watched every movement, tracking Ethan like a compass needle. He didn't touch the bowl. He didn't sniff it. He didn't even look at it for long. Archer noticed. That was the thing Ethan had almost forgotten. Archer noticed everything. The German shepherd rose and took 2 steps forward, not toward the puppy, toward Ethan. He looked up, eyes intent, a silent question written into the tilt of his head. Ethan met his gaze. "He's staying tonight," he said quietly. "That's all." Archer held the look for a long moment. Then he turned away, walking to his usual spot near the fireplace. He lay down with a heavy sigh, chin resting on his paws. The tension didn't leave the room. It just shifted. Night deepened outside. The wind rose, rattling the bare branches beyond the windows. Ethan dimmed the lights and sat on the couch, close enough to the puppy to reach him without standing. He kept his movements slow, predictable. The puppy didn't move from the blanket. When Ethan set a small dish of softened food closer, the puppy stared at it for a full minute before inching his nose forward. He sniffed, then pulled back sharply when Archer shifted his weight across the room. Archer hadn't moved closer. He hadn't even looked directly at the puppy, but the puppy felt it anyway. Ethan felt something twist inside him. He hadn't considered this, not fully. He'd known there would be tension, but knowing and feeling were different things. Archer wasn't wrong to be cautious. This was his space, his routine, his person, and the puppy. The puppy had learned that bigger shapes meant danger. Ethan reached out and rested his hand lightly against Archer's shoulder. The shepherd didn't flinch. He leaned subtly into the touch, grounding himself. "Good," Ethan murmured. He pulled his hand back and waited. Time passed differently after that. Minutes stretched. Sounds became louder. The tick of the wall clock. The whisper of the heater. The puppy's small, uneven breaths. At some point, the puppy did something that made Ethan's heart stutter. He crawled. Not forward, sideways, inch by careful inch, belly pressed low, claws catching slightly in the fabric of the blanket. He wasn't moving toward the food. He wasn't moving toward Ethan. He was moving away from Archer. Ethan started to intervene, then stopped himself. Archer lifted his head. The puppy froze again, halfway off the blanket, body coiled tight with fear. Archer didn't growl. He didn't advance. Instead, he looked at Ethan. Then, deliberately, he turned his head away. The effect was immediate. The puppy's shoulders dropped a fraction. His breath released in a shaky exhale. He finished the small movement, tucking himself into the far corner of the blanket and curling up so tightly his nose disappeared under his tail. Ethan felt something break open in his chest. That small choice, Archer choosing not to look, felt bigger than any command Ethan could have given. The night wore on. Ethan lay a second blanket near the couch and settled there instead of his bedroom. He didn't want to leave either dog alone with the other, not yet. Archer remained by the fireplace, eyes half-lidded but alert. The puppy slept fitfully, twitching, making soft sounds in his throat that never quite became dreams. Sometime after midnight, the puppy whimpered. Not loud, not enough to wake the house, enough to wake Archer. The shepherd's ears snapped forward. He rose quietly and took one step, then another, stopping just short of the blanket. He stood there, uncertain, muscles taut beneath his fur. Ethan held his breath. The puppy whimpered again, a thin, broken sound that carried more longing than fear. Archer lowered himself slowly to the floor. He didn't touch the puppy. He didn't press close. He lay down with his back to the wall, angled just enough that his body formed a barrier between the puppy and the rest of the room. The puppy shifted in his sleep, nose brushing Archer's flank by accident. Archer didn't move. Ethan felt his eyes burn, unexpected and unwelcome. He looked away, staring at the ceiling, listening to the two different rhythms of breathing, finding a tentative harmony in the dark. The house held them. By morning, nothing was resolved, but something had begun. Morning arrived without ceremony. The house woke slowly, as if testing whether the night had truly passed. Pale winter light crept through the windows, settling on the floor in thin, cold bands. The heater clicked on and off. Somewhere outside, a branch shed snow with a soft thud. Ethan lay still on the living room floor for a long moment, staring at the ceiling. His body ached faintly from sleeping wrong, but he didn't move. He listened first. Two rhythms, Archer's breathing, deep, steady, familiar. The puppy's, lighter, quicker, uncertain, but present. Ethan turned his head. The puppy was awake, curled tight on the blanket, eyes open and watchful. He didn't lift his head when Ethan moved. He only followed with his gaze, as if afraid that if he looked away, the room might change. Archer lay near the fireplace, stretched on his side. His ears flicked when Ethan shifted, but he didn't rise. His amber eyes opened just enough to register that everything was still where it belonged. For now. Ethan sat up slowly. He rubbed a hand over his face, feeling the roughness of stubble beginning to return. The house smelled like wood, old coffee, and the faint medicinal trace the puppy had brought back from the clinic. "Morning," Ethan said quietly. The puppy didn't respond. Archer's tail thumped once against the floor. Ethan stood and moved to the kitchen. He measured out food, Archer's first, as always, then prepared a small portion for the puppy, softer, warmer. He placed the bowls carefully, leaving space between them. No crowding, no pressure. The puppy watched from the blanket. Minutes passed. Archer ate with calm efficiency, pausing once to glance over his shoulder. The puppy didn't move, didn't creep forward, didn't even sniff the air. When Archer finished, he stepped back from his bowl and sat. He didn't guard it. He didn't look at the puppy. The puppy stayed still. Ethan crouched beside the smaller bowl and tapped it lightly with his finger. "It's okay," he said. The puppy lowered his head a fraction, then froze again, eyes flicking to Archer. Archer remained where he was, posture relaxed but attentive. His gaze stayed on Ethan, not on the puppy. That was enough. The puppy took one tentative step, then another. He reached the bowl and sniffed. His nose brushed the rim. He flinched, then leaned in and took a few quick bites before retreating 2 steps, chewing anxiously. Ethan let out a breath through his nose. Progress. After breakfast, Ethan made the call he had been avoiding. He stood by the window, phone pressed to his ear, watching the snow drift in uneven patterns across the yard. Archer followed him with his eyes. The puppy curled back onto the blanket, exhausted by the effort of eating. "Emergency clinic. This is Dr. Hale." "Hi," Ethan said. "It's Ethan Cole. I brought in the Labrador puppy last night." "Yes," Dr. Hale said immediately. "How is he?" "Stable," Ethan replied. "Still scared, but eating." "That's good to hear." Ethan hesitated, then spoke. "You mentioned rehoming. If that's still something we should consider." There was a pause on the line. Not hesitation, calculation. "It's responsible to think about it," Dr. Hale said, "especially with an adult dog already in the house." "I know." "I can reach out to a family who's been waiting," she continued. "They're prepared. Quiet home. No other pets." Ethan closed his eyes briefly. "I can keep him for a few days, until they're ready." "All right," Dr. Hale said. "I'll let them know." When the call ended, Ethan stayed where he was, phone still in his hand. The word responsible echoed louder than it should have. Archer rose and came to stand beside him, close enough that their shoulders almost touched. Ethan didn't look down, but he felt the dog there, solid, present. The puppy stirred at the sound of Archer's movement, lifting his head. He watched them with cautious curiosity, tail tucked, ears half back. The day unfolded quietly. Ethan worked at the kitchen table, glancing up often. The puppy dozed in fits and starts, waking whenever Archer shifted or a sound came from outside. Archer moved through the house with deliberate care, giving the smaller dog space without avoiding him entirely. By mid-afternoon, something changed. The puppy woke and didn't immediately curl inward. He sat up, just sat there, small and unsure, but upright. He looked around the room, taking it in. The couch, the window, the the dog by the door. His gaze lingered on Archer. Ethan held still. The puppy took a step forward, then stopped. His tail gave a single, uncertain twitch. Archer turned his head slowly. Their eyes met. The puppy froze, but didn't retreat. Archer studied him for a long moment. Then, without breaking eye contact, he did something unexpected. He reached out with one paw and nudged a battered rubber toy across the floor. The toy rolled to a stop halfway between them. Ethan felt the moment hit him like a held breath finally released. The puppy stared at the toy as if it had appeared by magic. He glanced back at Archer, then at Ethan, then back at the toy. Archer lay down, chin on his paws, gaze turned deliberately away. The puppy inched forward. He sniffed the toy once, twice, then picked it up and scurried back to the blanket, clutching it to his chest like a prize. Archer didn't move. Ethan turned his face away, blinking hard. It wasn't acceptance. Not yet. But it was an offering. The rest of the afternoon passed in that fragile new balance. The puppy explored a little, never far from the blanket, never without watching Archer. Archer allowed it, tracking the movement without interference. Ethan knew better than to name the feeling growing in his chest. As evening approached, his phone rang. He answered on the second ring. "Hi, Ethan," Dr. Hale said. "The family is ready. They can come tomorrow afternoon." Ethan's eyes went to Archer, then to the puppy gnawing gently on the toy. "Okay," he said. After the call, Ethan sat on the floor, back against the couch. He rubbed his hands together slowly, grounding himself. This was the right thing. On paper. Dinner was quieter than breakfast. The puppy ate more confidently this time, staying near the bowl longer. Archer finished and stepped away, giving him room without being asked. As night fell, the house seemed to grow smaller. The puppy followed Ethan from room to room, never getting too close, but never letting him out of sight either. Archer watched it all with attention that hadn't been there before. When Ethan laid out the blankets for the night, Archer hesitated before taking his usual spot. He paced once, then twice, then lay down closer to the puppy than he had the night before. The puppy whimpered softly, then pressed his nose into the rubber toy. Archer didn't touch him, but he didn't turn away this time either. Later, long after the lights were dimmed, Ethan lay awake listening to the house breathe. He heard Archer rise, nails clicking softly, then stop. He felt the floor shift as the larger dog settled again. The puppy let out a small, questioning sound, then quiet. Ethan didn't look. He didn't need to. He already knew that by morning, the choice would feel heavier than it had tonight. The first sign was subtle enough to miss. Ethan noticed it while washing dishes, his back turned to the living room. The house was quiet in that late afternoon way, the kind of quiet that usually meant things were finally settling into something that resembled normal. Archer lay near the window, head on his paws, eyes half-lidded. The puppy, still unnamed, had been chewing on the battered rubber toy, worrying it gently between small teeth. Then the sound stopped. Not abruptly, just absent. Ethan dried his hands and turned. The puppy wasn't chewing anymore. He sat hunched near the blanket, shoulders rounded, head lowered. His ears were slack, his tail tucked close to his body. He didn't look up when Ethan met his gaze. "That's not right," Ethan murmured. Archer's head lifted at once. The German Shepherd rose and crossed the room with unhurried purpose, stopping a few feet from the puppy. He lowered his nose and inhaled, long and slow. His posture changed. Nothing dramatic, but unmistakable. His back stiffened, his ears angled forward, then back. He looked at Ethan. Ethan felt the message without words. He knelt beside the puppy, careful not to crowd him. The small body felt warmer than it should have. When the puppy shifted, Ethan caught a faint sour smell beneath the clean scent of the house. Sharp and wrong. "You okay, buddy?" Ethan asked quietly. The puppy swallowed and turned his head away. That was the second sign. The third came an hour later. The puppy vomited on the floor, thin and sudden. He didn't cry. He didn't panic. He just stood there afterward, shaking, eyes dull with confusion. Ethan cleaned it up with the same controlled efficiency he'd once used to pack wounds under fire. His jaw stayed tight. His movements stayed calm. Inside, something colder took hold. Archer hovered nearby, tracking every motion. He didn't interfere. He didn't retreat either. His gaze flicked repeatedly between Ethan's hands and the puppy's face, his breathing shallow. When the puppy retreated to the blanket and lay down without touching his dinner, Ethan didn't wait. He reached for his phone. Dr. Hale answered on the third ring. "It's Ethan," he said. "Something's wrong." The clinic looked different in daylight. Still bright, still clean. But the windows showed gray sky instead of darkness, and the snow outside had been churned into slush by passing tires. The puppy lay on the exam table, too tired to tremble now, his small body wrapped in a towel. Archer wasn't allowed in the room. That, more than anything else, felt wrong. Ethan stood with his hands on the edge of the table, knuckles whitening as Dr. Hale examined the puppy again. Her movements were precise, her expression carefully neutral. She stepped back and removed her gloves. "Has he been vaccinated?" she asked. "I don't know," Ethan said. She nodded once. "I was afraid of that." She didn't say the word right away. She explained first, about dehydration, about immune systems in puppies, about how stress could open doors the body hadn't known were there. Then she said it. "Parvo." The word landed heavy and final. Ethan didn't move. He didn't ask the obvious questions. He felt Archer's presence in his mind, solid, watchful, suddenly distant, and understood something before Dr. Hale said it aloud. "We need to isolate him," she continued. "Immediately. Treatment can help, but this is serious, especially at his age." Ethan nodded slowly. "And Archer?" he asked. Dr. Hale met his gaze. "We'll test him, but adult dogs with good immunity, especially those vaccinated, often don't show symptoms. Still, separation is necessary." Separation. Ethan closed his eyes for a brief second. The memory came unbidden. A different dog. Years ago, before the quiet house. Before Archer had learned how to stand watch without shaking. That dog hadn't made it. Archer had been younger then, confused by the sudden absence, waiting by doors that never opened. Ethan opened his eyes. "Do it," he said. The clinic staff moved with efficient compassion. A veterinary technician, young, freckled, hair pulled back in a messy ponytail, took the puppy gently from Ethan's arms. Her voice was soft, her hands steady. "I'll take good care of him," she promised. The puppy lifted his head weakly, eyes finding Ethan's face. His tail gave a single, exhausted twitch. Ethan leaned in close. "I'm not leaving you," he said, voice low. "I'm just stepping back for a minute." The puppy didn't understand the words, but he seemed to understand the tone. The door closed between them. Outside, Archer paced, back and forth along the fence line. Nose low, tail rigid. He hadn't eaten. He hadn't lain down. He moved like a sentry guarding a border that no longer made sense. Ethan stood on the porch and watched him, the cold biting at his skin. The house felt hollow without the puppy's small sounds. Too quiet. Like a held breath that went on too long. Days passed. Ethan visited the clinic daily, sometimes twice. He spoke with Dr. Hale, listened to updates that never sounded as hopeful as he wanted them to be. The puppy wasn't eating. He was vomiting less, then more. His energy dipped and rose without pattern. At home, Archer changed. He lay near the door the puppy had last used. He carried the rubber toy from room to room, setting it down and picking it up again, as if he couldn't remember where it belonged. He stopped eating entirely. Ethan tried coaxing him. Hand feeding. New food. Nothing worked. On the 5th day, Dr. Hale called. Her voice was careful. "He's not responding the way we'd like," she said. "We need to talk." Ethan arrived at the clinic with Archer's toy in his jacket pocket. He hadn't planned it. He just picked it up. Dr. Hale met him in the hallway. Her shoulders were tired, the lines around her eyes deeper than before. "We can keep going," she said, "but you should be prepared. The next 24 hours matter." Ethan nodded. "Can I see him?" She hesitated, then nodded, briefly. The isolation room smelled different, sharper, layered with antiseptic and something faintly sweet. The puppy lay curled on a heated pad, IV line taped to his leg. He looked smaller somehow. Ethan stepped closer. The puppy's eyes opened. At first, there was nothing. Then recognition sparked. His tail thumped weakly, his head lifted. He tried to stand and nearly collapsed. Ethan dropped to his knees instantly. He pulled the toy from his pocket and set it gently beside the puppy's paw. "You see this?" he whispered. "Archer sent it." The puppy nosed the toy. Something changed. Not dramatically, not magically, but his breathing steadied, his eyes sharpened. He leaned forward, pressing his small body against Ethan's hand with surprising insistence. Ethan felt his throat tighten. Dr. Hale watched from the doorway, silent. The puppy licked Ethan's fingers once, then lay back down, exhausted, but alert. Ethan stayed until Dr. Hale gently asked him to leave. That night, Ethan slept on the floor again. Archer lay beside him, head on Ethan's leg. The dog's breathing was shallow, restless. Ethan rested his hand on Archer's shoulder. "We're not done," he said softly. "Not yet." The next morning, sunlight poured through the clinic windows. Dr. Hale met Ethan with something like a smile. "He ate," she said. "Just a little." Ethan closed his eyes, relief cutting through him so sharply it almost hurt. Over the next days, the puppy rallied, slowly, unevenly, but undeniably. He kept food down. He lifted his head when Ethan entered the room. He responded to Archer's voice when Ethan played a recording on his phone, ears twitching, tail tapping weakly against the pad. When Dr. Hale finally said the words Ethan had been holding his breath for, they sounded unreal. "He's stable," she said, and Archer tested negative. The ride home was quiet. Archer rode in the back, head up, alert. The puppy slept on the passenger seat, curled small but breathing deep. No one was left behind. The day they came home was brighter than it had any right to be. Winter still owned the land. Snow packed along the roads, bare branches etched against the sky. But the light had changed. It fell clean and pale, no longer heavy, no longer pressing down. It felt like a pause the world allowed once in a while, a moment where things could realign before moving on. Ethan parked in front of the house and shut off the engine. For a second, he didn't open the doors. He sat there, hands resting on the steering wheel, listening. The puppy, lighter now, warmer, shifted on the passenger seat. His breathing was deeper than it had been in weeks. Not rushed, not fragile. Just there, alive in a way that felt earned. In the back seat, Archer leaned forward, nails clicking softly against the rubber mat. His ears were high, his posture alert, eyes locked on the puppy as if the world had narrowed to that single point. Ethan opened the passenger door first. Cold air rushed in, sharp and clean. The puppy lifted his head, blinking against the brightness, then looked at Ethan with a steadiness that hadn't been there before. "All right," Ethan said quietly. "Easy." He lifted the puppy into his arms. The weight surprised him, not because it was heavy, but because it felt right. Familiar, like something that belonged in the space between his hands and his chest. The puppy didn't freeze. He shifted, tucked himself closer, nose pressing into the worn fabric of Ethan's combat shirt. His tail gave a small, confident wag. Ethan felt his throat tighten. Behind him, Archer let out a low sound. Not a bark, not a growl. Something in between. Something that sounded like recognition. The front door opened onto warmth and quiet. The house smelled the same as it always had. Wood, faint coffee, Archer's steady presence. But it felt different. As if it had been holding a place open and only now decided it could close the gap. Ethan set the puppy down on the familiar blanket in the living room. For a moment, nothing happened. The puppy stood there, legs stiff, eyes scanning the room as if checking whether the rules had changed while he was gone. His ears twitched at every sound. The heater, the distant creak of the house settling, Archer's breathing. Archer stepped forward. Slowly, deliberately, he stopped a few feet away and lowered his head, amber eyes fixed on the puppy. His tail hung loose behind him, not stiff, not wagging, just present. Ethan held his breath without realizing it. The puppy took one tentative step forward, then another. He reached Archer's chest and pressed his face into the thick fur there, exactly where he had weeks ago, before sickness, before separation, before the world had reminded him how easily things could be taken away. Archer didn't move. Then he shifted his weight and folded down, careful and precise, lowering himself to the floor so the puppy could climb against him without being crushed. His body curved protectively, creating a hollow space that the puppy fit into as if it had always been meant to. The puppy sighed. Not a sound of relief, something deeper. Ethan looked away. He let them have the moment. The afternoon passed quietly. No sudden movements, no forced joy. Just a gradual return to small routines. Water bowls refilled, blankets adjusted, sunlight tracked slowly across the floor. The puppy explored again, this time without stopping every few steps. He stayed close to Archer, brushing against his shoulder, circling back whenever he ventured too far. Archer allowed it, adjusting his position subtly to keep the smaller body within reach. Ethan watched from the kitchen, arms folded loosely, heart doing something he hadn't trained it to do. At some point, the puppy stopped in the middle of the room. He looked up at Ethan and barked. It was a small sound, more breath than noise, but it was clear, intentional. Ethan blinked. Archer's ears flicked, his tail thumped once against the floor. Ethan crouched slowly. "Hey," he said. The puppy trotted forward, confidence wobbling but intact, and sat. Not perfectly, a little crooked, but waiting. Ethan felt a smile pull at the corner of his mouth before he could stop it. "Well," he murmured, "look at you." He reached out and rested his hand on the puppy's head. The fur was warm, solid, alive. That night, the house slept. Ethan woke once, early, the way he always did. The room was dark, the quiet deep and unbroken. He listened automatically, counting breaths without meaning to. 2 rhythms. Archer's, slow and grounding. The puppy's, smaller but steady. Both there. Ethan lay back and let the tension drain from his shoulders. It felt strange to allow that, to stop bracing for loss. In the morning, the sun rose clear and cold. Ethan took both dogs outside, the leash slack in his hand. Archer moved with his usual confidence, head up, scanning the quiet street. The puppy walked between them, his steps still slightly uneven but determined. A truck passed on the road. The puppy stiffened. For half a heartbeat, his body lowered, instinct pulling him toward the ground. Archer reacted first. He stepped closer, pressing his shoulder lightly against the puppy's side. Not pinning, not forcing. Just contact. Weight. Reality. The puppy hesitated. Then he stayed standing. The truck went by. The sound faded. The puppy exhaled and leaned briefly into Archer before straightening again. Ethan stopped walking. He watched them, chest tight. That was when he knew. Not because everything was perfect, not because fear was gone, but because the puppy had chosen something new to lean against. They continued down the street together, 3 shapes moving at the same pace. Later that afternoon, Ethan made the call he'd been putting off. Dr. Hale answered, her voice lighter this time. "How is he?" "He's home," Ethan said. There was a pause, then a quiet understanding. "Good. I wanted to let you know," Ethan continued. "I won't be bringing him back for rehoming." Dr. Hale didn't sound surprised. "I thought that might be the case." Ethan glanced through the window at Archer lying in the sun, the puppy curled against his chest. "I'll help however I can," he added. "With finding another family, donations, whatever you need." "I know," she said. "That's why I'm not worried about him." After the call, Ethan sat on the floor, back against the couch. The puppy wandered over and climbed into his lap without asking. Archer followed and lay down beside them, heavy and solid. Ethan rested his forearm across Archer's back and his other hand on the puppy's side. "Guess that settles it," he said quietly. The puppy yawned and tucked his nose under Ethan's arm. Days passed. Strength returned. Appetite grew. Fear loosened its grip. One afternoon, while walking along the path near the trees, the puppy stopped. He sniffed the air, then leaned into Archer's leg, tail wagging once. Ethan looked down. "You got something to say?" The puppy looked up at him, eyes clear. Ethan thought of the streetlight, the box, the girls shaking hands, the way the puppy had waited, for traffic to stop, for someone to notice, for the world to choose him back. He swallowed. "Birch," he said. The puppy blinked. Ethan repeated it, firmer this time. "Birch." The puppy's tail wagged again. He stayed where he was, leaning into Archer as if the name had always been there, just waiting to be spoken. That night, Ethan wrote it down on a scrap of paper and pinned it to the corkboard by the door. Birch. He didn't frame it, didn't mark the date. Some things didn't need ceremony. In the weeks that followed, neighbors began to notice. A big German shepherd and a small labrador walking together, moving as one. A man with a quiet presence between them. Eyes scanning the road, not for threats, but for balance. People smiled. Some waved. Some didn't know why the sight eased something in them. They didn't know about the streetlight, or the clinic, or the nights spent counting breaths. They didn't need to. Ethan did. One evening, as snow began to fall again, Ethan stood at the window with Archer beside him. Birch lay on the rug, paws twitching in sleep. Ethan rested his hand on Archer's head. "Good job," he said. Archer didn't look at him. He just stayed. And in that staying, in the quiet agreement not to leave, Ethan understood something simple and unbreakable. Rescue wasn't the moment you pulled someone back from the edge. It was everything that came after. Sometimes miracles don't arrive with thunder or light. Sometimes they come quietly. On a cold road, under a streetlight, inside a cardboard box the world almost ignored. If there is a hand of God in this life, it often works through ordinary people who stop when it would be easier to keep going. Through hearts that choose to stay when walking away would hurt less. Through love that doesn't shout, but endures. In our everyday lives, we pass countless moments like that streetlight. Moments where someone small, scared, or forgotten is waiting for an answer. We may never see angels, but we are often given the chance to be one, simply by noticing, by caring, by refusing to leave. If this story touched something in you, let it travel further than this screen. Share it with someone who needs hope. Leave a comment and tell us what moved you most. Subscribe to the channel so more stories like this can reach hearts that are still waiting. And to everyone watching, may God bless you and your loved ones. May He guide your steps when the road is dark, give you the courage to stop when others pass by, and keep your heart open to the quiet miracles hidden in ordinary days.